We completely agree with you, okay? The original MR2 is impossibly cool. But before we all go getting far too enthusiastic, what are the realities when it comes to owning a 40-year-old icon? Well, we're about to show you because this is ReDriven and we take you through all the pros and cons of used cars, so hopefully you don't buy a shit one, including a classic like this. This isn't a shit one, these are great, but you know what I mean. ReDriven is powered by Wipertech. More on them later. In the meantime, scan that QR code. But how about we save all the bad news for later in the video and just start with the good stuff, like all the positives about these engines, which I can't really tell you about because I'm not a qualified mechanic. If only we had a real expert. Oh wait, we do. It's Jim.
Look, I'm going to be honest here, and I think I can speak on behalf of all mechanics my age. We love these things. Now, I've lost count of how many of these I've worked on over the years, or cars that I've driven with these engines in it, but every time over the years, it just brings a smile to my face. Now, it could be argued that this is one of Toyota's strongest four-cylinder engines, and it is peak 80s Toyota reliability. But the 80s was a really, really long time ago, about 45 years ago. So yeah, look, a few issues can crop up, and we'll get to those in a second. Now, I know the internet is full of 1,000 horsepower cars, and by those standards, these don't make a lot of power, but the power to weight ratio, look, it is actually perfect in these cars.
That's right. Thanks to these weighing about the same as a sneeze, you don't need huge power to get your blood racing. Actually, to put this into perspective, in naturally aspirated form, these have about the same power to weight ratio as an AE86, the original Mazda MX-5, and the first gen Swift Sport, all celebrated performance cars. But in supercharged form, well, their power to weight ratio matches things like the Porsche 944 and the Bath 500 and the more recent Swift Sport. But unlike all of those cars, this thing is about as go-kart as a road car gets. And a big part of that is it feels like your bum is the pivot point for the direction of the car. It's awesome, you feel connected with it all the time because the car rotates sort of through the seat of your pants. And the pillars, they're so thin, it's almost like they're not actually there at all. Also, all the control points just feel so light and delicate, like you can control the car just through your fingertips, and I find that completely addictive. But then it's not just the fun part of driving that is completely wonderful. There's also all this other stuff that no one ever talks about. The handling is obviously wonderful, but the ride quality, exceptional. So many modern performance cars can feel very harsh and crashy over shitty roads, but in this, I went hunting some bad roads and it just sort of floats and glides over them. This thing could teach modern performance cars so much about just ride quality, but then again, it still handles beautifully. Also, because it is so small and the vision out is excellent, parking it is so bloody easy. Also, traffic is a breeze, not only because you can fit in really tight spots, but because everybody loves this car, they let you merge in. They let you pull into traffic. It brings joy to people's lives. Actually, that's one of the highlights of driving this, is just seeing people nod appreciation to it or give you a thumbs up, or every pedestrian I go past smiles at it. And it's just a lovely feeling. It's just so nice to drive a sports car that has no pretense. And honestly, it feels easily as theatrical as a supercar in its own kind of special way. I mean, obviously, it's nowhere near as fast or as easy to drive as a modern supercar, but I think that's a good thing. See, being slower means that you get to sink your right foot into the carpet for longer periods of time, and that means you have more time to just enjoy the whole car. And almost being forced to learn all the car's special little nuances, that's a good thing too, because it means that you learn the car and you fall in love with it more and more over time. And part of learning all the little idiosyncrasies means that you're going to get good at a thing called MR2 Tetris. But once you master that, these can actually be pretty bloody practical for what they are. For example, the boot space is actually pretty good. It will fit a set of golf clubs. Not to mention, being mid-engined means you also get a bit of frunk space, as long as you don't mind your best clothes getting dirtied by the inside of the spare wheel. And as far as spaces for all of your crap inside, you've got a great little glove box compartment here that is perfectly shaped for your Matchbox car replica of the exact car we're in. Also, I love that there's like a little elastic strap here to hold all your paperwork. Little shelf down here. This is genius. Toyota are thinking so far ahead because there's a little shelf on top of the climate control air conditioning, HVAC system, that is perfectly shaped for your iPhone. Another little felt line storage pad just here. You do have a cigarette lighter and ashtray, which I'd normally find disgusting, but we're talking the 1980s, so we're just going to excuse that for now. More storage under here, more storage in here. There's a spot for your CDs up here, like the Best of Dire Straits and Mark Knopfler. Fantastic CD that goes there. Behind the seats, there's even more storage, but more on that in a second. Then you've got door bins that they're pretty bloody shallow, but they do fit your New South Wales historic and classic vehicle logbook perfectly. These little door handles are going to fill up with all sorts of crap and dust and whatnot. But I think for the tiny shape of the car, or the tiny size of the car, it is really, really important to check for any signs of accident damage or dodgy repair work. Owners like Brad that owns this particular car mentioned that during the normal workday, you can get a few, let's say, little bits of contact and rubbing happening. So make sure you go over the entire car and check the panel gaps. Also, just make sure that any of the vinyl wrap and sponsor stickers are all in the right spot. That's a pretty good amount of practicality. But the practicality can have a bit of a party trick here as well. On the sunroof models, the removable sunroof section, it can store perfectly in the front. And on the T-bar models with the removable roof panels, well, they fit perfectly behind the front seats. Actually, speaking of the seats, bloody hell, they're comfortable. I sort of thought they'd be either overly squeegee or a bit too firm, but they're a nice amount of supportive, but very, very comfy. Also, the materials I've used, manufacturers, can we start bringing velour back? Because this just feels great. And it kind of is almost like a subtle version of Velcro. So when you're going through the corners, the material itself holds you in place. Also, we came across a few comments when researching this that if you're over 6 foot tall, you're simply not going to fit in one of these cars. I still think this looks like the quintessential hot hatch. In fact, I like the fact it's more hot hatch looking than a Polo GTI, but also way more mature than an i20N. I personally like the fact that it's not covered in wings and vents and stupid body kit bits. Well, you know what? I'm around about 5 centimeters taller than the singer from the synth metal band Voyager and MR2 owner, Danny Estrin. This is in my driving position and I'm not even all the way back. That's all the way back and now all this is too far away. So I'm well over 6 foot tall and I fit in here easily. If anything, I've got a good amount of headroom. What are you talking about? If you're over 6 foot, you can fit in this, no problem. Oh, actually, fun fact about that band Voyager, they actually competed in the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest representing Australia, and they had one of these MR2s on stage with them when they performed. Doesn't get much cooler than that. But back to the car. Okay, yes, I fit. But in terms of driving position, it is a little interesting. I'm kind of finding that if I turn left, my hand doesn't really fit between my leg and the steering wheel. And I feel like I'm just slightly offset a little bit. But again, I think, this is an 80s performance car. It should have some kind of quirks about how you sit in it. And anyway, the other ergonomics are spot on. This tunnel here in terms of resting your arm on it, fantastic. And just leaning your arm there while changing gears. By the way, the shift feel in this is just magnifique. That's Japanese for really bloody good. But overall ergonomics, air conditioning, great just there. Everything is easy to touch and get to. It's great, it's fine, it's good, you'll love it. Actually, one thing you're going to really love is the feel of all of the switchgear. Manufacturers, can we start bringing back this kind of stuff? Like, this all just feels like, listen to that, and all the aircon controls. They're solid buttons. When you move things, you can sense that when you push something mechanical is happening in the background. I just want to sit here and play with the headlight switches and the windscreen wipers all day long. Even the indicator stalks, it's so solid. Oh, and also something I forgot to mention when we were driving, I was expecting the interior to be super rattly, right? Because it's got 235,000 kilometers on it and it's 40 years old and there's a lot of plastic in here. But no, it's solid, it's basically silent. Isn't it funny how when we've done certain Mercedes-Benz or BMWs or Audis or European cars that have, 40,000 Ks on them and are maybe 2 or 3 years old, they can rattle like crazy. But in this, no. Also, if you're looking at buying one of the Japanese import MR2s, and there's a high chance you will because most on the used market are the Japanese imports, there were 4 different trim levels. The lower 2 are pretty sparse in terms of what features and equipment you're going to get. The higher 2, you're going to get things like alloy wheels, a body kit, and a few extra accoutrements. The Aussie delivered cars like these were kind of a mix of the higher specs. So you're gonna get electric windows, central locking, air conditioning, and a digital clock. And let's just talk about the vibe in here. Okay, it's small, but it doesn't feel too small. I thought it was gonna feel like I'm basically wearing the car rather than sitting in it, but somehow it doesn't feel claustrophobic at all. And this design, I just love. It doesn't get much more 80s than this. Actually, maybe it does, because how's the exterior design of this thing? Also, okay, they might maim pedestrians, but pop-up headlights are one of mankind's coolest inventions ever. Also, you forget just how small these are until you see one again in real life. In fact, they're so small, I can hug the entire width of the car. And this feels nice. Also, thanks to these things being so light, they barely eat through the consumables like tyres and brakes. In fact, plenty of owners that track these all the time mentioned they're getting multiple track days out of a single set, so that's going to be good for your wallet. And so is scanning that QR code or hitting the link below to get 15% off and free express shipping on some of the best wiper blades in the business from WiperTech. Look, these are the only wiper blades we use. We genuinely love them, and they've been supporting ReDriven for years, so why not show them some love? But if you want to set completely for free, all you have to do is do what James has done and lend us your car to film. And if we film it, we're going to give you a set for free as a thank you present. To volunteer your car, there's a link down below. Click it. Now, something really important to know about the mid-cycle update. This basically rolled out across various models through 1986 and 1987. The thing is, though, there can be some crossover of parts. What I mean is that you might be able to find a 1987 car that has a mixture of pre and post-update bits and pieces. And typical for Toyota, it seems each year model could have other detailed changes, both aesthetically and in terms of equipment and certain mechanicals like suspension setups. And there can be a whole bunch of other really subtle little nuances depending on where the car was sold as well. For example, Aussie delivered cars like this can actually be quite different to the ones you'll find in the UK or the US or Japan or really anywhere else in the world. Actually, this is something to be really aware of. Not all parts are interchangeable between all cars. It's so critical to make sure any part you order actually fits your car. Luckily, it's incredibly easy to do this. Simply get in touch with Neil Jones on Instagram. He is the go-to guy when it comes to these first-gen MR2s, and he was instrumental in helping us put this video together. And he carries plenty of parts, which you might need. But we'll get into the more concerning parts of the ownership experience later in the video. But look, whatever you need, Neil is the guy. We've added a link to his Instagram down in the description. Also, it's no surprise that for a car that lacks any kind of pretense, the owners groups and forums are some of the most supportive and we think least toxic that we've ever come across. You guys are bloody legends. But before we betray all those wonderful people by taking through all the negatives with the MR2, let's talk finances. Now, only a few years ago, you could pick up a pretty bloody good MR2 for under $15,000 here in Australia. Not anymore. These days, $15,000 will buy you an MR2 in extremely rough condition that's going to require a whole host of TLC to get it back to its best. Something mint like this, well, currently the market tops out at about $40,000. And I do say currently because if the other 80s and 90s performance car icon prices are anything to go by, good MR2 prices are only going to go one way, and that's up. And this might be because the prices for the Halo sports cars like the Honda NSX, Mazda RX-7, Porsche 911 and Toyota Supra are all going through the roof to the point that they're basically unaffordable for the majority of us. The smaller, lighter understudies like the Honda Integra Type R, Mazda MX-5, Porsche Boxer and MR2, the prices are creeping up because they were more attainable. For now at least. But before you go racing out to buy one while they're still somewhat affordable, unfortunately, it's time for a reality hit. Here's all the negative stuff. Do us a favor, right? If you're going to buy one of these, put some money aside for some proper driver training, or at least go and do some track days with an instructor. Yes, these are fantastic to drive when you know what you're doing. In fact, back in the day, Wheels magazine tested one of these against the original MX-5, a Nissan 300ZX, and a VN Group A SS Commodore, and these things posted the fastest cornering times. But if you're attempting to replicate those speeds and lift off mid-corner, well, these things can snap into oversteer faster than you can say, oops, And then combine this with a complete lack of safety features. We're talking no ABS, no airbags, no stability control, and the pillars and the bodywork clearly prioritize saving weight over your well-being, and the combination of all these things, yeah, it can be catastrophic. Also, the more sensitive of you out there might, complain about the fact that the steering is very heavy when you're parking it because it has no power assistance. There's a really easy solution to this. Grab a spoonful of concrete and toughen up. And also, while the engine is so much fun to rev out, doing that in a built-up area, like when you're pulling into traffic, isn't that considerate to the public. Also, the complete lack of torque of these engines sometimes can catch you out if you need to, make some evasive maneuver through traffic, but that does mean that you've got to drop a gear or two, and that's fun. And again, rev it out, and that is so much fun. I should also note, when revving it out, you're going, my God, this is hammering along because it feels so fast, and you look down and you're like, I haven't even got to the speed limit yet. That's awesome. But something else to consider here, and especially for the Japanese import cars going to places that have salted roads. The Japanese cars, they didn't have a whole lot of rust protection, and once they go onto a salted road, it just eats them to pieces. Also, the Aussie delivered cars, they rarely have too many rust issues. Nevertheless, you need to check for rust, and what you need to check is just there. But seriously, especially look down the base of the A-pillars, along the underside of the front bar, and around the supports for the front and rear bars, especially on the earlier cars, inside the boot in the corners, and seriously, anywhere over the car, because any rust on these, it might be a sign of some very poorly repaired accident damage. So can any mismatched paint between any of the panels. Remember, these used to be very, very cheap, and they do like to make fools of really shit drivers. That's never going to be a great combination. But as far as electronic gremlins go with these, chances are probably none. That's really interesting because when we featured more recent, BMWs and Mercedes-Benz and Audis, they can be riddled with electronic gremlins. But here we are with a 40-year-old Toyota, and it has pop-up headlights and powered mirrors and electronic central locking, and yet they don't seem to have any problems with it. Although, some of the exterior trim can struggle with age. For example, the plastic trim around the C-pillar, it is known to crack, although replacements are available. The little plastic bushes for the wiper arm linkage, they're known to wear out. Annoyingly though, you might have to buy the entire wiper linkage assembly, and that can be a little bit expensive for what it is. Also, the little plastic cogs that are in the window mechanism for the window to go up and down, they can do their best impression of Magic Mike and strip. Annoyingly, it means that your window gets kind of jerky in operation, or it just doesn't go up and down at all. But a hot tip from the owners to save some money when fixing this, don't buy the genuine Toyota part because they might try to sell you the entire window mechanism thing, and that's bloody expensive. You can get replacement cogs for way cheaper. Next up, the rubber seals for the T-tops and the sunroof models. They can perish with time, and that can let water leak into the car. Trust us, you don't want that happening. But again, like the plastic cogs, there are good aftermarket replacement parts available. Fun fact as well, this is one of the very rare hardtop coupe models. Not many of these around. Very cool. Some of the plastics inside may have seen better days as well, especially in this center console section where your elbow kind of rests. It's known to get a few cracks in it. Also, the dashboard and the A-pillars, they can do the same, especially in harsh UV conditions like here in Australia, although in this car, not a problem. Something else that doesn't like our harsh UV conditions are the leather interiors. If they aren't cared for meticulously, they can crack and look crap in no time. Owners report that over time, these velour interiors, they last way better, way more resilient. Also with the air conditioning, just make sure that the fan works on every single setting, because sometimes the resistor pack can kind of give up on these, but if it does go, it's a super cheap and easy fix. And the same goes for the stereo and the head unit. Look, even when these things were brand new, the stereos absolutely sucked. By now, they are truly terrible. But upgrading the speakers is easy. Maybe fit some extra sound deadening while you're at it. Also, while you could swap out the original head unit and have a screen there with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, all that sort of stuff, I kind of think don't do that. There's something very cool about these original systems. Instead, what you can do, you can get a module that hides under the seat and it talks to your phone. So you can kind of have all the latest connectivity, but with the aesthetics of 80s. And that's a perfect balance. Actually, if you want to see what's involved with all this sort of stuff, we made a full guide video with our mates from Automotive Superstore, and it's sure to answer all your questions. Plus, to work out whatever parts and accessories are going to fit your car, simply scan that QR code or hit the link below, type in your rego, and the Automotive Superstore site will sort through their hundreds of thousands of parts and accessories to work out what's going to fit your car best, including these. Plus, they ship Australia-wide, and everything is covered by a full manufacturer's warranty. But will you need that kind of delivery and warranty service when it comes to these engines? Like, what parts are you going to need? What goes wrong with these? Well, that's another question for Jim.
Look, at this age, you are going to see some issues, and one of the most common issues you're likely to see now are oil leaks. They leak from everywhere if they've never been maintained. Cam seals, front seals, rear main seals, valve cover gaskets, and probably the worst one you're likely to see is the distributor and the distributor seal. But they're all relatively easy to fix. The front seals and the cam seals you'll do when you do the timing belt. Now the timing belt is due on these every 100,000 kilometres or 5 years, so it is due, so do it. Now it's not actually expensive to do, although in this car, it's a bit of a pain in the arse to get at. And speaking of pains in the arse, the cooling system on these, it's a little bit complicated. You have to be very careful when you're bleeding these because you can get an airlock in it, so bleed it properly. Now, all Toyotas from the 80s had a lot of vacuum lines on them. Now, these do as well. They often can leak and you can get vacuum leaks and it can cause misfires. And it's fairly safe to say that the person working on it before you has absolutely put some of those vacuum lines on the wrong fittings, or more likely they've just blanked them off entirely. Now these engines are an old school engine with a distributor and spark plug leads and everything that 80s engines had. That distributor, look, it's likely to have some wear and there's a lot of moving parts in there. So it is going to be leaking oil as well. So it's more than likely going to need an overhaul, and you can actually buy brand new ones. And they're pretty cheap too. Now these engines have TIVIS, which is Toyota Variable Induction System. They just have a variable valve inside the manifold. It is vacuum actuated, and looping back to the person who got the vacuum lines in the wrong spot, if they've messed those vacuum lines up or if they're leaking, it won't work properly, and when it doesn't, the car does feel a little bit sluggish. You do lose a bit of drivability. Now another issue you might see, depending on how well it's been looked after, it's likely to have worn valve stem seals. Now what happens there is when the engine's sitting around idling for a long period of time, it tends to start blowing a bit of blue smoke, or on trailing throttle as well. Now you can change these valve stem seals in situ. It's much easier in cars where it's not mid-mounted. With an MR2, you're probably better off just dropping the cradle and doing it on the floor. It can be labour intensive. Now, if the car's got a lot of kilometres on it, my advice is just pull the head off it, get the head serviced, get the valve stem seals done, get it all done at the same time. It won't be cheap, but they're worth it. Now the supercharged versions, they are pretty much the same with the same type of problem. The supercharger itself is pretty reliable. They can have some bearing issues, and they can also have some drive clutch or coupling complications. The clutch on them is a bit like the clutch on your AC compressor in your car. The supercharger does have its own oil, and there's a weird little yellow wing nut dipstick you've got to try and fish around and find. It's a bit hard to get at, and you've got to pump the oil in. Well worth doing, because the parts for these superchargers and the superchargers are actually getting a bit hard to find now. And again, the supercharged models have a bunch of vacuum lines all over them, operating bypass valves and things. They are probably all going to need some attention. But overall, mechanically, these things are actually pretty simple. Now, if you've got even the slightest bit of do-it-yourself skill, you should be able to tackle most of these jobs by yourself.
But there's something incredibly sad about the MR2. It's the fact that it sort of shines a light on everything that's wrong with the car industry today. Unlike the current crop of giant SUVs and utes and pickup trucks and even performance cars that seem to be constantly growing in size, the MR2, yes, it is so small, but it's so incredibly efficient with its space. If looked after, it's bloody reliable, because there are plenty out there that have got north of 300,000 kilometres on them and they're still running faultlessly. How many modern performance cars are ever going to see those sorts of numbers? Compared to modern cars, especially EVs, it's so light, so it barely eats through consumables like tyres. So surely that's going to be better for the environment. But the biggest reality check to how sort of filtered and uninspiring so many modern cars can be are the way they drive versus this. Okay, sure, the MR2 lacks any kind of safety features, and if you don't respect it, it might try to hurt you. But short of maybe a new MX-5 or a handful of Japanese K cars, nothing new feels as deliciously engaging, yet as completely approachable and just as fun to drive as the MR2. Obviously, make sure it passes a full pre-purchase inspection with flying colours, but if you're in the market for a weekend toy, like a Porsche 911 or maybe even a sport bike, you got to check out one of these first. or one of these. Honestly, for the money, these are both epic.
But the 80s were 30 years ago? No.
That was great. That was great. It was great.
The 80s were 45 years ago, dude.
Really?
Yeah, I'll do that again.